Director of the Swami Vedananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, revered Swami Vedananda Saraswati ji, Mr. Rajesh Lachman, Ms. Yudisha Balikaran, Mr. Sapiwe Mchunu, Mr. Piyush Khandalwal, distinguished guests, online viewers and listeners. Namaskar and welcome to episode 2 of Aarshdhara. Aarshdhara is an online series of interactions on scriptures composed by ancient sages of India, with today covering the Yajurveda. Indeed, in our midst, I would like to welcome Mr. Rajesh Lachman, the COO of Hindwani Radio, for his introductory remarks. This program is in association with the Hindi Siksha Sangh of South Africa. Namaste and welcome, Rajesh ji.
Thank you very much, Srishti ji. Dr. C.P. Yogi ji, Dr. Swami Vedananda ji, Srishti ji, Yudisha ji, Sipiwe ji, and Haji. Thank you so much, appreciate it. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you very much for the opportunity. The Hindi Siksha Sangh is deeply, deeply grateful to the Swami Vedananda Center for this wonderful opportunity. Aarshdhara is very special to us simply because it brings to our listeners and, of course, the viewers from the other mediums that we'll be using, the gems of our Vedas, the gems of our Shastras, the gems of Indian thought and philosophy. Today's topic, the Yajurveda, the best I can describe it as, if I could use it, is the science of worship. The beautiful thing about Hinduism is that it has a very scientific base in everything it does, including ritual worship, including the association one has with one's maker. So today, as we go through the entire program, I'm hoping listeners and viewers will be able to endorse the fact that there's a science behind bhakti or devotion. But more important than that, this knowledge that has come to us from ages, sometimes some people say over 5,000 years ago, has actually been the foundation of our civilization. And we have a responsibility to make sure this continues seamlessly and unabated. And it is initiatives like this that help to make sure that this happens. Thank you so much again for joining us. I am sure we're all going to enjoy this. And we are deeply grateful that we have a really wonderful scholar in Swami Vedananda who is going to really, I think, unleash some elements of the Yajurveda, which perhaps we ourselves may not have been aware of. So thank you very much for this opportunity and God bless you. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rajesh Lachman. And that is Mr. Rajesh Lachman, the CEO of Hindwani Radio. To commence our program, I would like to invite revered Swami Vedananda Saraswati ji, the spiritual head of Arya Samaj South Africa, with his interaction on Yajurveda with Ms. Yudisha Balikaran, a journalist and a radio presenter. Welcome, Swamiji and Yudisha ji, for your interaction on Yajurveda today on episode 2 of Aarshdhara.
A warm and loving namaste to everyone. Before we proceed, I would like to extend my gratitude to the Swami Vedananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India, Durban, as well as the Hindi Siksha Sangh of South Africa for making me a part of your Aarshdhara series, as not only does it generously offer our listeners as well as our viewers spiritual insight, it also affords me the opportunity to interact and learn about our ancient Hindu scriptures. A special welcome to our revered Swami Vedananda Saraswati ji, who is the spiritual head of the Arya Samaj of South Africa. We are indeed very honored and excited to have you on board for the second episode of our Aarshdhara series. As I have mentioned during our first episode, in Hinduism, there are 4 Vedas, namely the Rig Veda, the Yajurveda, the Samaveda, and the Atharva Veda. Today we focus on the teachings and guiding principles of the Yajurveda and how it impacts our modern day living. Swamiji, my hearty namaskar to you.
Namaskar, Yudhisha ji and Dr. Yogi ji, Piyush ji, and all our divine souls that are listening to us today. It's an honor. Yudhisha ji, in fact, I wish I could at least in 10% be able to follow in the footsteps of Sri Swami Vedananda ji. I know you addressed me as Swami Vedananda ji. I'm humble Swami Vedananda. I hope in some way I'm able to walk in the footsteps of Sri Swami Vedananda ji. But thank you nonetheless for the honor. It gives me the inspiration to walk in those footsteps, definitely.
My apologies for that, Swami Vedananda ji.
No.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's proceed with the interaction regarding the Yajurveda. Firstly, if you can tell us, Ved is eternal knowledge. So what does Yajur mean? If you can give us a simple and brief introduction of the Yajurveda for our viewers and listeners.
I'm absolutely honored to be able to, in some way, share a little knowledge on our divine word of Brahma, the Vedas, and in particularly this case, the Yajurveda. But Yudhisha ji, if you'll allow me, before I commence with a brief of the Yajurveda and what it means, I think it's important to understand in this context, what is Veda and where Yajurveda fits in. And I want to add right in the beginning that the Yajurveda is beautifully vast. And in this session alone, I would never be able to share the full depth of the knowledge contained in Yajurveda, with deep insight into mathematics, the various sciences, astronomy, such as the orbit of the moon around the earth and the earth around the moon, earth around the sun, at least thousands of years before any Western scholar proved it, gravitational equations, etc. Today, I've chosen to touch on basic aspects which I feel are in a way fundamental to the times we're living in and how Yajurveda specifically can help us navigate through our current circumstances. So the term Veda, as you already know, comes from the Sanskrit root vid, which means to know. And by Veda, we mean divine knowledge, not ordinary knowledge, which is usually subject to omission or addition. Vedas is infallible. It is immortal, flawless, fathomless. It's a source of all true knowledge, as we know. Whatever is Veda. The very world of existence is Veda. The knowledge of the world of existence is Veda. The extension of knowledge through thought and research further is Veda. And to use that knowledge for the benefit of mankind with the protection and preservation of nature and the environment, and that's vital and that's important, without hurting any form of life, that is Veda. It is knowledge pure and simple, just as science is knowledge. Now, science is knowledge of nature as nature is, and as it works according to its own laws. In science, you'll know there's no story, there's no history. But similarly, in the Veda, there is no story and no history. So just as science is knowledge in scientific language, free from local color and historical variations of form and meaning, so Veda too is knowledge in scientific language, free from local color and historical variation. For after all, Veda is the root of all sciences. And as you go through this Aarshdhara series, you will find how these sciences come to life in root form through the Vedas. However, there's a difference between scientific knowledge and Vedic knowledge. While science is knowledge of nature to the extent that man has been able to discover it, Veda is the quintessential knowledge of all that is, including nature, all that happens, all that we are, all that we do, and all that we reap in consequence of our actions. It is the original and the universal knowledge of the reality of existence and the ideality of our aspirations, covering the facts and processes of existence, their interactions, and all the laws that operate in that interaction. So in short, Veda is an eternal articulation of omniscience, the voice of God. And Vedas are aparashya, not created by any human being. They are nothing exclusively by themselves because they are an expression of the Creator's own essential power. And that is declared unequivocally in Yajurveda, chapter 31, verse 3 and chapter 31, verse 7. Now, Vedic knowledge is classified thematically into 3 sections. And I'm doing this introduction so that you'll understand where the Yajurveda fits in, because it's important in the whole sense of Vedas in its entirety and the critical nature of Yajurveda. Stuti, Pratna, and Upasana. 3 critical categories, which is what Vedic knowledge in its entirety is classified into. Stuti is praise or solemn reverential remembrance and description and celebration of the attributes and nature and function of the divine power. Then we have Pratna, which is prayer, resolution to realize our limitations and rise above those limitations by calling on divinity for aid and blessings when we have exhausted our own effort and potential. And then there is Upasana, which is meditation, the surrender of our limited identity to participate in the divine presence. Now, Stuti implies knowledge, jnana. Pratna implies humility and action, and that is karma. And Upasana implies total love and surrender, or even communion, and that is bhakti. So Veda, as a body of knowledge, is one. But for practical terms, it comprises 4 parts: Rig, Yajur, Sam, and Atharva. And in them are these subjects of action, communion, and science. So Rig Veda is the knowledge of God, creation, nature, and man. It tells us, okay, there's this thing called creation. You are part of this creation. There is God, there is the universe, etc. Yajurveda then is the knowledge of the application of knowledge in practice for right living, and it's known as the Veda of Karma. So now that you know this knowledge of creation, what is your part and what is your duty in this creation? That is Yajurveda. And then Samveda is the celebration of knowledge in successful living. It is the Veda of Bhakti. And Atharva Veda is the umbrella vision of life and divinity, a top coverage of Vedic knowledge in a piety state of spiritual living. It is known as Brahma Veda. Now, Yajurveda is the knowledge of the science of living, being as well as becoming, at the individual as well as the collective level in relation to nature, humanity, and divinity. There is nothing unrelated or isolated in the world. This entire universe is what is called a Purusha, a living, breathing, intelligent, self-organizing sovereign system where the sole ruler is none other than our omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent cosmic spirit, the Brahma Supreme. We as humans are cells, mere cells in the cosmic body of this major Purusha, this living and participating system of the world. And we now, having been given this Yajurveda, gives us the actions and the duties that we perform to be able to live in this Purusha. It celebrates the glory of active life. Yajurveda provides the preparation for living, education system, love and marriage for the joy of family life, retirement and community life. It teaches us national and international organization, governance, even parliamentary democracy, which I shall discuss later, duties of leaders, etc., etc. And that's just on the social side. The knowledge of body, mind, and soul and rebirth, the journey of the soul, self-realization through comprehensive living is then the spiritual side. In the beginning, Yajurveda was revealed by the Almighty to Rishi Vayu, and it forms the essential basis of human civilization. It spells the famous Gayatri Mantra, which we all know. It teaches and explains all aspects and needs of the human conduct, which is helpful in making life beautiful and cultured. And most importantly, Yajurveda contains the essence of true dharma, social behavior, right conduct, good governance, principles of economy, industry, and all related matters. And it reminds us that the vibrancy of life is capped with the warning of death which too is a gateway to life again, or to ultimate freedom, if we want to call it that way, which the ultimate moksha is what we're all trying to achieve in the presence of Om Kam Brahma, that eternal supreme spirit. So in a nutshell, this is the introduction to Yajurveda and where it fits into the greater scheme of Veda.
Thank you very much, Swamiji. That was such a beautiful explanation of the Yajurveda. If we can dig in a bit deeper, I know you have covered basically Yajurveda being the science of living. But with your research, your academic study about the Yajurveda, how is it considered an important scripture? What is special, what is unique and interesting about the Yajurveda, and especially in our modern society? How can the people with their living standards of today allow the Yajurveda to now fit into their daily living?
I love the way you said current context, or in today's 21st century, or today's lifestyle. And every time I try and give any form of knowledge from the Veda or any of our scriptures, I think you'd agree with me that what's important is how does it apply to you as a human, as a mother, as a father, as a co-worker in today's day and age. Much of the way we take our scriptures, either in the form of our mythological stories, either in the form of just prayer, it becomes just one aspect of our lives. And we forget that the fundamental values that we learn from the Vedas as the basis gives us the tools to apply in this very day and age. Yajurveda itself in chapter 26 verse 2 says, Yate mam vacham kalyanam avadhani janebhya, which says, just as I speak or reveal this auspicious holy word of the Veda for all people, without discrimination of high and low or caste and creed, language or whatever, so should you too communicate it to all people of the world, whoever, whatever, or wherever they be. You see, Yajurveda is Karma Veda, knowledge of the application of knowledge in practical living in a positive, creative, and constructive manner, both the individual and at the collective level. This way of living and working is called Yajna, which in simple words means a selfless and participative way of life, and thereby creating the maximum out of the minimum for all. Now, understand what I'm saying. Creating the maximum out of the minimum for all, which includes nature, humanity, the environment, and the whole universe, with complete faith in the living, breathing, self-organizing, self-conscious sovereign system, this Purusha as we know. Now, as I said, Yajurveda contains, amongst others, the essence of the true Dharma. Now, it's important to ask, what is Dharma? Dharyate iti Dharma. That which is adopted and pursued in practice, in thought, word, and deed is Dharma. And we have two versions of Dharma. That which is Sanatana or eternal, which prevails and rules the universe and the human world and everything outside of us, which is revealed in the Vedas for humans to follow. And then we have the actual or temporal, which is observed by humans, which is our Dharma, the Dharma we all speak about. The temporal Dharma is also called Yuga Dharma, the one observed according to the state of time and place and historical context or current circumstances. It is a time-dependent version of the Sanatan. Now, the Vedas gives us knowledge of existence and the laws of existence. They give us the knowledge of karma and the way we should work. And they also give us the knowledge of how to break through our limitations and reach the top of human freedom and divine bliss. Now, our freedom of choice and action is the progressive dimension of the Atman, which refuses to go down under pressure of circumstances. The Vedas thus gives us the code of values, Dharma, through the Yajurveda. And God then gives us the potential to pursue those values freely. That's our test as humans. Life is not meant to be a bed of roses. We have to perform these duties to be able to reach that realization, to be able to grow as a spirit. Now, values are sanatana, they're eternal, they are permanent. But the ways and forms of realizing them are often different because they have to be according to place, time, and circumstance. The base values of dharma are truth, goodness, beauty, justice. We know all these beautiful values. But how they were experienced then and how they experience now is different. And we've got the tools for them sitting in the Yajurveda. The right way to realize the permanent values of dharma is yajna. A positive, creative, cooperative, productive, and contributive way of living, acting and participating in the cooperative world of this divine creation. Now, everybody should realize happiness and progress through the happiness and progress of all. The ideal principle being one for all and all for one. Yajna, as expressed through the Yajurveda, is thus the best and highest way of all living. Yajna is value and the way to realize that value. It is Vedic dharmic karma because it's creative and not destructive. The purpose of yajna lies in its very meaning. The word like yajur, right? The word yajna like yajur is derived from the root yaj, which means to add or to combine. And what does it tell us? That yajna, through the yajur, combines the self with the cosmic spirit through action, through karma. Now, yajna is not just merely ritual, because ritual, as with any symbol, is the starting point. It's the point of focus. But we are meant to transcend once we understand. So yajna is not merely a ritual, but a complete way of life. It is a noble act of piety, virtue, and service. And they have an extremely ethical basis. They provide human beings with an opportunity to transcend their selfishness and help others, including nature and animals. The Vedas declare that life itself should be led as a sacrifice, in which every action should be an offering. Yajna has to be performed selflessly without personal, social, or familial interest. And the whole act of yajna is dedicated to that Almighty through nature and humanity. And it goes from Agnihotra, that havan that we all do, the individual and family, right to Ashwamedha on the national and international global level. Every process in the natural and cosmic order of things is yajna. It's a universal process. So we're doing the havan and we see how the elements are transformed, the ghee, the samagri becomes the smoke and the fire, etc. Now look at up there in the sky. The creation and dissolution of stars, the solar systems, the galaxies. All of this physical process is the greater yajna, the greater havan. Everything is a continual process of maintaining, creating, evolving, and sustaining. This is the beauty of life and as taught through the Veda. Whether the workings of the universal cosmos, the physical functioning of our body, the activities and role of government on a national level in society, the working of nature, when we draw our examples from nature, this whole process is yajna. And this is what Yajurveda is trying to compare us and teach us to work in accordance with. And the most practical form of yajna we all know how to perform, as instructed and guided by the Vedas, is Agnihotra, which not only has a spiritual mental effect, but a physical, social, and environmental one as well. Now, Agnihotra is the material symbol of yajna, which purifies the environment and improves one's health and welfare. All substances that are offered into the fire maximizes the attributes of those individual substances, which then go up in the air and spreads in the atmosphere. The effect of yajna and its physical and purification process is like this now. Whatever you put into the fire, the ghee, the herbs, the seeds, the wood, are all rarefied, they're combusted. And the smoke is transferred to the air, and the particles fuse in the clouds. The clouds then give back these purified elements to the earth by way of rain. Agnihotra controls pollution in this regard. And as a result of pure rain and a purified atmosphere, food, vegetables, herbs, and all in the environment, including the water, is enriched and purified. Back in the day, when this knowledge was given, we were given our key to be able to prevent things like global warming, to be able to prevent the excess amount of carbon dioxide in the air. We've been given the tools, and it's been proven. The United Nations itself has agreed. And the performance of Agnihotra becomes essential in alleviating what man himself, we, have exploited from nature. But as we draw from nature, Vedas also gives us the key to be able to heal it. Before we offer the pure ingredients into the fire, we recite Swaha. What are we saying? It's not just the purification that happens, but also the inner purification. Swaha means we should always employ sweet and mild speech devoted to the good of all creatures. We should utter only that with our tongue which is purity. And that purity should exist within our consciousness. We should be pure in thought, word, and deed. Swaha is full of several qualities such as to love all, leaving behind discrimination, ravages of hatred, adopt truth and give up falsehood. The recitation of all the mantras in Agnihotra, most of them end with Idam Namama. That is where you learn about selflessness. Nothing is mine, it is all thine. It all belongs to the greater cosmos. In this way, egoism, pride, and selfishness does not develop in the mind of man. Rooted from the Yajurveda also stems the need of the 16 sanskaras that we perform throughout our life. The Yajurveda introduces the Varna system, not caste system, the Varna system of social living, and the 4 ashramas, Brahmacharya, Grihast, Vanprastha, and Sannyas. These teach us about how to live in the world with discipline, order, and hard work, not in accordance with our birth, but with our aptitude, taking into account our strengths and weaknesses. But today, everybody talks about the caste system based on birth. If you're born like this, then you're doomed. No. Yajurveda clearly says in chapter 31, verse 11, Brahmana is the mouthpiece of this Purusha. The Kshatriya is the arms of defense. The Vaishya is the thighs of the body. And the Shudra is created as the sustainer and the load bearer, which is generally referred to as the feet. Now, one thing you must understand that's important is that the Vedas is poetic. You cannot take the Vedas literally. You must understand the context, the tone, and the analogy, and draw out the deeper meaning like a parable. Because if you look at it straight, you'll say, Are, feet is a Shudra, what a demeaning thing, and now the Brahmana is, all holier than thou because it's the head. But it's not about that. It's about how the system equivalates to society. The head is the thinking portion. The shoulders holds the load. The limbs keep the body functioning. And the feet bears all of this together. Every system works. If without your feet, you can't walk. Without the head, you can't think. So every part of the body is vital. And this is what the Yajurveda tries to bring out into a proper social order system in life. The Brahmins were the priests, the scholars, the teachers, which were vital to train and teach humanity. The Kshatriyas were the administrators, the rulers, government in this case. The Vaishyas are your merchants and your service providers, keeping the economy going. And the Shudras is the ground labor, the groundwork. The Varnas in the Vedas are a part of a model to explain and guide human behavior and skills so that necessary steps for structuring of an ideal society in a sensible manner can be taken. And this is what Yajurveda builds. So you've got this body of knowledge in Rig Veda, you got this life, you're living this life, you're taught now how to be good, how to live according to the values, but how do you function as a society? The Vedas and God doesn't leave you high and dry. It gives you a system of governance to be able to do that, a social order which makes things streamlined, which works according to people's strength. If we talk about the Varna system and what includes a leader, for example, how do you elect a president? How do you elect a government? What are the rules and regulations that govern that? And the beauty is the Yajurveda gives that to us. But most importantly, you must remember, the Vedas clearly assert There is only one caste, humanity. All humans have the same rights irrespective of their birth, race, language, gender, or sexual orientation. What status a human achieves must be solely based on his or her merit and nothing else. Today, the world is left in an absolute ruin due to the very misconception of the above Vedic law. People of higher classes frown upon those in lower classes. This whole class system. Women are discriminated against based on their gender, and other people based on their sexual orientation. There is no mutual love, respect, or unity among society. Man's ego and pride have taken over his humility and humanity. And instead of helping each other and progressing in this world, man's only wish today is the selfish fulfillment of his desires and expression of his selfish opinions, no matter what means upon which it is acquired or the environment that surrounds him. It is to be remembered that each and every one of us has our duty. And we all need to respect every single human being. And Yajurveda chapter 40 verse 6 clearly declares, Yastu sarvani bhutan yatmane vanupashyati. Sarve bhuteshu chatmanam tatho na vichikitsati. One who sees the self in all beings and all beings in the self does not feel any hatred or anguish against any creature, for he sees and experiences the oneness of all beings. What does that word oneness tell you? It's not telling you that you're Indian, American, black, white, pink, Tamil, Hindi, English speaking. No. It's humanity. It's the language of humanity. Now, my friends, aside from personal living and spiritual growth, aside from environmental care and protection, like I said, what is amazing is how the Yajurveda clearly teaches us about ideal governance on all levels, from a country's governance, what defines a president, a cabinet. Remember, Yajna is the basis of Yajurveda. It's not about the self or the ritual practices, but is the joint activity of the human nation. Yajna is the corporate activity of governance, government, and administration of the people, by the people, and for the people, for the peace and progress of the entire nation. Now, before I discuss this part, we all know what we are experiencing today when it comes to our leaders, governments at large worldwide. We forget the power that we as the people have when we cast our vote. And as I explain this little portion to you from the Yajurveda, take it to your heart, because the next time you go to that ballot station, remember, you have the power. You have the power to hold your leaders to account, because together you govern the country. Now, what constitutes the government of a free country? Yajurveda chapter 9 verse 40. It is the people who are the authority behind the government. And it is the people and the government who rule the country in cooperation and interdependence. The Vedic idea of a self-governing country or nation is Vidata, a systematic organization of the people and the government for the purpose of Dharma, which is the protection and advancement of the freedom, welfare, happiness, knowledge and education, justice, exercise of rights and duties of all, individually and collectively, in a state of freedom from poverty, ignorance, and injustice. Now let me blow your mind even more, because Yajurveda describes a world government. You see, the boundaries of a government need not end at the borders of the country. Depending on the will and the political culture of the people of a country and the countries of the world, these extend up to the globe. Yajurveda teaches people of the world to unite under one umbrella, one people, one government, one law, one constitution. And this is what Yajurveda chapter 9 verse 40 says. Ye citizens and members of governments of the world, join together, consult together with wisdom, knowledge, humility, and expertise, and jointly accept these leaders as the rulers of the nations of the world for an institution and constitution of a world government, a great commonwealth of the peoples of the world for the establishment of a happy, prosperous, and glorious order of humanity, free from conflict and violence. This is the Vedic vision of a one world government, one humanity, one international family, before the world could even think of the League of Nations after it had suffered from the disaster of World War I, or even before the United Nations after the devastation of the atomic age. And reference again can be made to Yajurveda chapter 27, verse 45. It even describes to you what is a president, what is a leader. Now, it doesn't only describe, remember, with Vedas, you need to look beyond just what it says. When it talks about president or leader, it can be the leader of a family, the leader of business, the leader in a community organization. Now, what is the president? Yajurveda chapter 7, verses 21 to 22 says, a president or a leader should be inwardly a Brahmana and outwardly a Kshatriya. A person with ideas, attitudes, and values of a sage, but with the competence, will, and performance of a ruler, dedicated wholly, exclusively, and necessarily to the protection and advancement of his country through clean, spotless, and transparent administration. My friends, we need to realize and appreciate the gift given to us in the form of Veda. Every breath we take is God giving us another opportunity to learn and to evolve into better human beings and ultimately realize the true nature of our existence. And Yajurveda is the key for that. Not just in its reading or recitation, but its practice to bring life, the values within the mantras by living according to them. Veda is not meant to be Veda is meant to be experienced and lived, not just studied. It's life's manual. It's not a magazine, newspaper, or journal, or just an ordinary book that you take off the shelf. Unfortunately, today, we've forgotten about the Creator and our true self, and have become so attached to this material existence that in the eventuality of death, we fear the very thought of it. We believe that this temporary existence of life is permanent and go on our worldly affairs wanting more and more and more. Never satisfied, we curse God when we don't get what we want, and ironically, we praise Him for something we desperately yearn for. We never acknowledge that Paramatman, we never acknowledge nature for the things we already have, for the breath we take every moment of every day, or for the chances that we are always given to righteously succeed. We fail to realize that material objectives, though necessary at times to be fulfilled, are not the ultimate aim of life, as they are finite in nature and always change and never result in true bliss. We are not defined by our family, our friends, or society. We are defined by our thoughts, our choices, and our actions. Ultimately, we are defined by our dharma, the very dharma that Yajurveda teaches us to live by. The Yajurveda emphasizes a synthesis in life between the material and spiritual, with the ultimate purpose and aim being God and self-realization. Life is truly beautiful, but change is a reality too, some good and others not to our liking, even though it is for our benefit. However, our needs must rise above our wants. The quicker we stand up and understand the dualities of this life, the easier it will be in dealing with life's ups and downs. The Vedas are the backbone that will stabilize and guide you every step of the way through this maze we call life. So I hope in that nutshell, you understand the intricacies, but the beauty of what Yajurveda offers in a nutshell.
Swamiji, you have explained it so vibrantly, so beautifully. I really liked that analogy where you say a true leader has to be a Brahmana inwardly and a Kshatriya outwardly. Absolutely beautifully said. And the other point that you brought up, which really stuck with me, was the scripture and the theme that flows throughout the Yajurveda being one for all and all for one. And, you know, currently in modern society, the buzzword that's going around is called mindfulness, which people are now just studying or now just looking into, and yet has existed in our scripture, you know, for all of time, basically. So it's about going back to basics, back to the scripture. So thank you very much for so eloquently explaining that to us, and yet so simply put, but so beautifully put. Swamiji, you've already quoted some mantras from the Yajurveda, but would you kindly, continue to quote or mention some other verses from the Yajurveda which you would consider as an important message or guidance, to our present life?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you mentioned mindfulness, because there's a mantra that I wanna share as the last mantra that I'm gonna quote, and I want you to pay attention to that, because perhaps you could use that key going forward for simple meditation. But the mantras that I would like to select, Gayatri mantra makes its presence not only in the Rig Veda but emphasized in the Yajurveda. But we all know the Gayatri mantra. But that's just one of thousands of mantras. But I think there are three critical mantras which should be highlighted for those to understand the essence of spirituality, the essence of Yajurveda. Now, dedicated to truth and dharma together and individually, we need love and friendship with open eyes and an open mind, having given up hate, jealousy, and slander. And so, Yajurveda chapter 36 verse 18 has a beautiful mantra which says, Om Dhrite Drin Hamam Mritasya Ma Chakshusha Sarvani Bhutani Samikshantam. Mitrasya Ham Chakshusha Sarvani Bhutani Samikshe Mitrasya Chakshusha Samikshamahe. And it means, O Lord of infinite love, destroyer of suffering and sorrow, bless me that all people and all living beings may look at me with the love and eyes of a friend. May I too look at all living beings with the love and eyes of a friend. Bless us so that all of us may look at each other with friendly eyes and treat one and all with love and compassion. Thus, joined together in love and friendship as one family, we should dedicate ourselves to a common and universal good. Pursue the common and universal values of truth and dharma, and achieve our common goals of truth, beauty, and goodness in a world of peace, prosperity, and freedom for all. The second mantra is from Yajurveda, chapter 1, verse 5. And it goes, Agne vratapate vratam charishyami takchakteyam tanme radhyatam. Idam aham anritat satyam upaimi. It says, O Agni, Lord of light, truth and dharma, master protector of the vows and observance of truth, here I take a lifetime vow of discipline that I shall ever follow truth and dharma in thought, word, and deed, in life and conduct. Pray, help me to observe truth and dharma. Pray, give me strength to keep the vow that I have pledged. I, here, now, pledge myself to give up on truth and follow truth and dharma, come what may. And the final mantra I want to share with you, as I said, comes from the Shiva Sankalp mantras. Right? Now, Sukta or Shiva Sankalp Sukta, Shiva Sankalp means right intention or having an auspicious resolve, and Sukta is divine song. The Shiva Sankalp Sukta consists of 6 verses, and chanting the 6 mantras of the Shiva Sankalp Sutra, which is the 34th chapter of the Yajurveda, it helps to steady the mind, and it's a good method to control and master one's subconscious mind, the chitta, and the faculty of thought through meditation, aside from physical awareness and practice. So I'm going to recite the 3rd mantra for you because it has a very beautiful meaning. Yat pragyanam uta cheto dhritischa yat jyotir antaha amritam prajasu yasmanarite kinchana karma kriyate tanme manaha shiva sankalpamastu. And it says, may my mind be calm and focused, which includes intuitive knowledge, consciousness, and mental stability, that immortal inner light in all beings without which no action can ever be performed. Yajurveda, chapter 34, verse 3.
Thank you very much. Yajurveda as a scripture, representing ancient Indian knowledge. How is that universally applicable, not just to us as Hindus, but to all human beings or to the creation at large?
Yudhisha, as you would have seen, the general narrative and tone throughout that little brief that I did, and I really say it was a brief because Yajurveda is vast. You will not find the word Hindu, Indian, American, black, white, anything. The term is Manor Bhava Janaya Devyam Janam. O man, be human and make a world of divine beings. A human being with all its beautiful diversity. If God himself can give us different skin colors, different looks, so there is diversity. But the beauty is that we all have the same color blood inside of us. Shed the skin, you can't say who's who. And that's the beauty of Veda. It is universally divine because the values that we learn, the social order that we learn, the values to how could I put it? From the self to the family, to the community, to the nation are universal. And we see this applicable to any nation, not just particularly Hindus or Indian alike. And that is why, if you reflect as Hindus in general, we are not a discriminative religious people. And the reason for that is it is within our nature to be all compassionate, all loving. And to a degree, some people have said that is our weakness, but I say it's our greatest strength, because we are then putting into practice the universality of our dharma by being open to all, by being loving to all, by not worrying about, converting others. That's not the purpose, because ours is a dharma of humility and humanity for all. I hope that answers your question.
It absolutely does. I like that part where you say not converting everybody, because at the end of the day, it is universal. And, it brings me to an incident. My favorite T-shirt has a slogan saying being human. And it's something that I often wear. And I remember at a retreat I was at once, one of the guests asked me, can we be anything else? Why are you wearing this T-shirt, being human? And I said to her, well, you know what? I feel there's a distinct difference between a human being and being human. So therefore, I wear the T-shirt.
Absolutely. In fact, Yudhisha ji, we have developed into a nation of human doings, not even human beings anymore.
True.
We are so caught up with keeping our life at a particular level, we've forgotten how to live. That's why life has become so monotonous. We've become so stressed. We become so angry. Life is what it is today because it is a reflection of how we've developed ourselves, how we've degenerated from those morals. And yet that's not who we are inside. Maya, this veil, has become like a sheath of wall, let alone a veil that it's described as in the Vedas. It's become a wall. And we need to chip away at that to realize, hey, you know what? We forgot what it means to be happy, to be blissful. We forgot what it means to speak compassionately, to look around us and to take into consideration this breath of fresh air that we get to breathe every day, which the plants provide us. Yet we want to chop down the trees and we want to focus on putting these lovely buildings and, look at the brick and mortar and be amazed at what human beings can design. Yet look at the nature around us. Look at God's divine beauty. Tomorrow, in 10 years' time, we might have to be paying for the air that we breathe that was given to us freely. So we've lost our way and disconnected with nature. That's why coronavirus that we're experiencing today, it's not the enemy. We created it. We created this enemy, and the solution lies within us. Going back to what the Vedas teach us and going back to this value system is the start to eradicating the future disaster that we're yet to experience.
I 100% agree with you, Swamiji. Swamiji, Listening to you, you are so fluent with the Vedas, especially with quoting the mantras and, with the different chapters. How did did you find any difficulty in studying and understanding the Yajurveda as a scholar?
Extreme. In fact, firstly, I'm going to say, I would not like to recognize myself as a scholar, because to me, Vedas is not scholarly. It's the birthright of everybody. The scholarly aspect keeps it academic. But when you realize Veda, when you start practicing and living Veda, it becomes a part of who you are. So I regard myself as an aspirant of Veda. And in that way, when you start, when I first picked up the Vedas, Yudhisha ji, at the same breath, I decided to close it because it was daunting. You reading this, how does this knowledge? It's like you sending a kindergarten child into a university education, right? But for me, I really discovered Veda. Obviously going through the steps, it's important to learn commentary first. And anybody who wants to go through the Veda, it's your birthright. You got to understand it. You got to know it. But start with the simple text that we have. Start with the commentaries. They build you up. They give you the common understanding. And from that common understanding, when you start reading the mantras, it puts two and two together. But for me personally, what really made me in tune with Veda was the experience of the mantra. So it's one thing understanding, you got the academics, you understood the base knowledge, you read the mantra, you see it. How do you realize it? And you realize it through practicing it. When you practice it, when you make Veda a part of who you are, because that knowledge is ultimately the inner knowledge of the Atman. When you realize that knowledge and it becomes a part of your being, it becomes naturally to you. You become fluent in it. And therefore, it doesn't make you a scholar. You become Veda. You become knowledge. Whilst we are in the veil of ignorance, we are a part of it. Therefore, we can regard ourselves as scholars, as this, as that. But it's not a matter of category. A manual, to master the manual. What happens when you master a manual, Yudhisha, and you're using the product? When you master the manual, you don't need to use the manual for the product. You become fluent in the product. So in this case, the manual is just there to guide us along the way. And once we hit the path and we've reached the destination, you have accomplished Veda. But to start with, go through the commentaries.
Mm-hmm. I think, Swamiji, we may have to coin the slogan, our Vedas is your birthright, as you say.
Absolutely.
Swamiji, tell me, how did you get the inspiration or the motivation to study Yajurveda? What made you follow this specific path?
So I'm going to answer your question holistically as Veda in general. And as I said, and as I described, Yajurveda is that path to put into practice the realization of the knowledge of Veda, right? So for me, I'm going to use my journey a little bit in this example. So here I am, South African born, coming from this sort of, call it Western lifestyle, inverted commas, coming from an environment where you are provided for. You're not short of anything. The culture is different, though we know what it's like to be religious, but we don't know what it's like to be religious, or spiritual rather. It's become very much a state of mechanics. It's when you come out of your comfort zone and you go into, and in my case was going to India, where you're taken out of your comfort zone completely, and not just going to the cities, but going to the villages, going into the jungles of India, meeting yourself, aside from categorizing yourself on the critique or what's the word? The analysis of others. When you meet yourself for who you are, you appreciate the knowledge of Veda better. When you meet yourself and face your own demons away from your comfort zone, you realize the value of values. You realize the value of spirituality. And that's what I'm saying. Vedas is very much an essence of experience, not so much study. Because academics can only take you to a certain level. But academics means nothing if you can't translate the academics into experience and being. And for me, the motivation was translating what I thought was the academic nature of religion and the Vedas to the experience. The more I experienced, the more I was engrossed. the more I participated, the more I allowed myself to surrender and become a part of it. That journey takes you in a way that words will never be able to describe. And that is why I always say Vedas is just nothing for recitation. Start, even if you start with one mantra, start by practicing that mantra. And that change and transformation it does to you alone is the motivation to take you step by step. And for me, it was the journey that got me inspired. I always like to say, I was a Hindu before sannyas, but the dharmic human that I became afterwards is the essence of what truly being a Hindu was. Because the term Hindu is a very recent term, right? We go as human beings, we are beyond that. I mean, as I said, in the Vedas, you won't find the term Hindu. It's Manurbhava, as I said. So it's finding yourself and realizing that what you categorize as religion and the teachings, the essence and the sweetness and the nectar is in the experience. And like I said, you don't have to be a sannyasi to do that. You don't have to run away into the forest to do that. No matter who you are, you can be the chief director of the Department of Home Affairs. You can be a teacher, you can be a student writing matric. You can still experience the bliss of what Veda has to offer without having to be a scholar. Because the experience of those values helps you make the best decisions at whatever point you are in your life. And that's the beauty of it.
And Swamiji, rounding up our interaction today, I must say very, very interesting. I just wanted to know, I'm a common person. I've got my job. I've got a family to see to. But I also find it's important, but like you say, not just study, but to imbibe the knowledge of the Vedas into my life.
Yes.
As a revered Swamiji, what would you say to us common people? How important is it? I'm going to say study in inverted commas, because as you said, it's not, that's from an academic aspect. It's something that you got to imbibe into your daily life. How important is it, especially for the younger viewers and listeners out there, to imbibe the knowledge of the Vedas into our common modern day lifestyle?
So we know the life we're living and what we see around us. And it's not pretty. We have to call a spade a spade. It's catastrophic. And as the days pass, the more the days pass, the more catastrophic it becomes. Therefore, by listening to that brief of the value system of the Vedas, it is vital, absolutely vital, to start building a community of cultured citizens, of cultured children that start living by dharmic values, one value at a time. And let me tell you the beauty of values. You take the 5 simple values: truth, integrity, compassion. You select one. The other elements of the others automatically have to be there. Start value by value and implementing that value in every decision that you take. If you get angry every day, take a step back and think, how can I choose to respond otherwise rather than react with anger? Because that's starting to practice dharma. If I know I'm picking up a cigarette to smoke, when I pick that cigarette in my hand, I must be aware to think twice. Can I delay it for another half an hour? It's simple steps that are vital to start following a value-based system to create a generation that will save us and save the future from the catastrophe that we are in. And unless we embark on a value system and start focusing on value-based education right from the level of home, because remember, youth is one thing. Remember, our parents have let a lot slide at the same time. We've let our guard down. As parents, you have a very important responsibility to ensure that you bring up your children according to the dictates of dharma. A child doesn't teach you, you teach the child. And yes, in this day and age, we know how eruptive situations might become because the mindset has changed. That doesn't give you any right to say, okay, never mind, you continue. No. Because at the end of the day, when you stand up and meet that challenge and become the parent, and infuse that dharma not in an aggressive way, but in an intellectual way, then you start building a family and a community that's more aware of a value system that direly needs to be embarked upon. And it starts at home. And from home, when you go out there, we know what home is one thing. When you go out there, what you expose that in school, in the community, is another picture. But the more emphasized it is at home and the more they realize the consequence of those actions, we pray that the awareness becomes more stronger. But it's absolutely critical to change the generation, to change the way in which we are heading. The study, the practice, and the living of Dharma is imperative.
Swamiji, Dhanyavad. Thank you so much for so generously imparting your wonderful advice and information on the Yajurveda. I absolutely look forward to interacting with you in future topics as well. So once again, Dhanyavad to you.
Thank you so much, Yudhisha ji, and to everybody on the panel here. With all the love, light, and peace of my heart, I'm humbled and honored to have been given this opportunity. And please, be the dharmic person that you are. Be the enlightened soul that you already are. The only difference is ignorance has covered us, but ignorance can turn into knowledge and bliss. My challenge to all of you is live in spirituality, be spirituality, and reach the heights that you are meant to reach. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Indeed, thank you so much, Swami Vedananda Saraswati ji, for that buddhi and that gyan, leaving us into such a deep, transcendental state. Swamiji, whenever you speak, indeed, it's divine Amrit. Yudhisha ji, listening to your t-shirt story about being human, what I've learned of Yajurveda today, and what Swamiji did say is we can simply heal the world by just being human. With that, we've come to the close of Aarshdhara episode 2 on the interaction of Yajurveda. I'd like to introduce Mr. Sipiwe Mchunu from the Swami Vedananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban to render this evening's vote of thanks.
Namaskar. Greetings to all of you. On behalf of Swami Vedananda Cultural Center, I am so honored today to deliver the vote of thanks on today's episode 2 of the program Aarshdhara, meaning the interaction of Yajurveda. I'd like to thank our online guest who participated on today's program. Allow me to thank Sri Rajesh Lashmanji, COO of Hinduvani Radio, for the introductory remarks that he gave this evening. Secondly, I'd like to thank Swami Vedananda Saraswati ji, the head of Arya Samaj, South Africa, for the wonderful interaction that he had with Yudhisha Palikaran ji, a journalist and a radio presenter. The interaction, Swamiji, was out of this world. I am not of Hindu faith, but I learned, I picked up so many things, because on this Yajurveda, there is a sense in me that I think the Yajurveda is for all human race. So if the Yajurveda is for all human race, it means I can count myself in also, because I am also a human race. So it was like out of this world. I was listening, you said it all. Just to summarize it, you said it all. So inside me, there was a thing that says to me, I can listen to Swamiji today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, in the next 10 years. I can just listen. You know, whatever you said this evening, Swamiji, it made sense. There are so many things that you have said about the governments, that Yajurveda is talking about the government. That also, it was an eye-opening for me in particular. It was also an eye-opening. Now I understand that the Yajurvedas are the knowledge of the science of the living. So it means all human race. So it means if all government of this world can just take a second or a minute to read this Yajurveda, it will make sense, it will make change in this world. So in short, I'm saying Dhanyavad ji, Swami ji, thank you very much. Yudhisha ji, Dhanyavad ma'am, thank you very much. We really enjoyed the program. To both of you, I'm saying thank you. May God bless you. To Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Director of the Swami Vedananda Cultural Center, Sristi Harinarayan, Sri Piyush Khandelwal, thank you very much for taking part on today's program. To all our online participants who were with us on this wonderful program, we'd like to advise you to visit our Facebook page so that you'll be updated about all cultural activities organized by Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center in Durban. Once again, Swamiji, Vedanandaji, Dhanyavadji, thank you very much. Rajesh Lashmanji, thank you, sir, for everything. Yudhisha ji, thank you, ma'am. To all of you, have a wonderful evening. Namaskar.